Hey guys, welcome back. Today I had a request to talk about Russian watches. Russian watches are not the first thing that come to people's mind when they think of top-notch timepieces. You think about Rolex, you think about Omega, you think about Seiko, or even Timex nowadays. But Russian brands have been making watches for decades, and some of them even before the Second World War. We just don't hear often about them. And when I first started my channel, I talked a lot about watches because they are affordable. They are affordable, they're unique, they're eye catching, and different. Grabbing one of these watches, and they are usually a bargain, you will not only be getting a piece of watchmaking history, but something you can boast to your friends and family, and you will have a cool story to tell. And every watch tells a story, and these Russian watches do have some stories. So, first watch on this list is Polyot. Polyot means flight, and it's one of the oldest and most important Russian watch brands. And I think it's their flagship brand. They're making watches ever since the 60s, and they have so much cool watches that it's insane. From the Aviator to the watches, that's space watches. I did a lot of videos and reviews. The best place to get these watches, especially vintage ones, is eBay, but you can as well find it because they're so popular. You can get it on Amazon as well, and there are very, very interesting watches. 3133 chronographs, Polyot Strela. I did a review of Polyot Strela, and nowadays they are using 3133 chronograph movement, but Strela is type of watch that looks like classy 10 lane. Strela is like your IWC Portuguese chronograph. They come in variety of colors and they are just great. So those are two of my favorite Polyot watches. Strela. I also had a Polyot Aviator. It was a bit more modern, but it looks like a Fortis cosmonaut watch also. And on the used market you can buy a lot of Polyot watches. On eBay you can get a vintage for as little as $20. From the vintage dress watches from Polyot, I recommend taking a look at Polyot Deluxe. So whether you want a Strela, Aviator, Okean, or Polyot Deluxe dress watch, Polyot has it all, and it's one of my favorite Russian watch brands. The second on the list is probably the most popular and people are most familiar with. It's a Vostok. Vostok means east, so we said the Polyot means flight. Vostok means east, and such a cool name for a watch brand. Like I said, most people are familiar with because they are dive watches. There's a Vostok Amphibia, which is their flagship dive watch, and it's also one of the best and most affordable dive watches and horologically interesting. It's a somewhat of iconic watch, and you can see it in many watch collections, especially with the dive watch collectors. The lots of special editions of Amphibia, and for around 60 US dollars you can get fantastic watch. As far as the company itself goes, it's been making high quality watches since the 40s, I think 1942. But for the most part, company focused on making watches for military individuals as well as special forces, and of course the watches work equally for you, for me, and I just love them. They include also pilots, divers, and lots of different watches. You just dip into the world of eBay and these watches, and you will learn and find lots of these watches. Of course, the most popular are Vostok Amphibia and Vostok Komdersky, And Vostok is a no-nonsense brand. All of these watches from Russia are very affordable when compared to Swiss counterparts, but some of them are equal, if not better. So first we had Polyot, which means flight, Vostok means east, and third favorite brand from Russia is Raketa, and it means literally a rocket. Most of you guys have heard about Rocket Big Zero, Raketa Big Zero. It's fun, very light-hearted watch. I did a review. It has a very interesting dial layout. Vintage examples aren't difficult to find, but you get it for under $100. And most of these watches, most of Raketa watches, were my first introduction to Russian watches, because you can get it literally for $20 on a Patel 100, and you get a Russian version. It says on the bottom of the dial SSSR, or export version that says USSR. So it's a cheap watch, no frills, Russian handmade, hand-winding movement, in-house from Raketa. Even to the day, they're making their movements in-house, and the history is from somewhere from the 1700s. Even today, they're making their own watches, and it's the oldest watch company in Russia, as far as I know. Beautiful watches. I already mentioned Raketa Big Zero, Raketa Power watches, 24-hour dial, Copernicus. Raketa Copernicus has that moon and sun shaped hands. Fantastic, wonderful little watches, and very affordable. Next brand on the list is Sturmansky. Yeah, it's not my favorite because I don't know how to pronounce it, but I think it's Sturmansky Gagarin. And this watch, to be honest, is not my really favorite watch, but you cannot make a list without this one, because when the space race was hot topic back in the 60s. Everyone wanted to go to the space, Cold War and everything. A lot of watch companies were seriously trying to get their watches to space on the first missions from NASA, Moonwatch and everything else, you know the story. But on the other side of the globe, behind the Iron Curtain, Gagarin had already made the first trip around the Earth in a spacecraft, and he was wearing the Sturmansky Gagarin watch. Of course, it's not possible to wear this exact watch he wore. He wore it back in 61, but you can get vintage versions from eBay or a similar watch on Amazon. So Sturmansky is definitely interesting, and they have a very special designation on the wrist of the first cosmonaut who ever went into outer space. But the mere fact that this is the brand that it was chosen for this task speaks volume about the quality and products turned out by this quality. This is definitely not my favorite Russian brand. Maybe it has a lot to do with me don't know how to pronounce it properly, Sturmansky, but I think I'm doing a good job, and no list is complete without this one. So the next watch is really not my cup of tea, but it's a dive watch, and I know a lot of you guys are dive watch collectors, and if you are serious dive watch collectors, there is no reason of not owning this one. Well, there is a reason. It's ugly and it's big, it's monster. Or you can say basic, quirky, and cheap, but it's none of those things. This watch is H2 Armor. It's crazy. Some of the models have a diameter of 58 millimeters, and if you take account the huge crown, this is one of the biggest, heaviest watches you'll ever come across. I did not own one, but these watches have a serious history because they were designed in the 70s for the Russian Navy, and they are still produced in small numbers in Zlatoust. It's a small industrial town, and that's the name of the watch, in the Ural Mountains. And this is obscure brand. They don't produce a lot of watches, and this watch is more of a conversation piece than something of a daily wear, but something it is really something. If I was a extreme dive watch collector, I collect only dive watches, I think this has a place in it because if you can get your hands on one, it's up to you. I had to mention it because it's really quirky, big, huge, monstrous, but somehow it's somehow it's cool.